part cynical satire, part sci-fi post-apocalyptic adventure, and all badass. We've been fans of Judge Dredd for quite a bit. I don't know when I introduced you to him, but somewhere along the way I introduced you to him, and I remember telling you to stay the fuck away from the Stallone adaptation, which you eventually saw, but at the right time. You had already been exposed to the proper.
And I did used to like it.
Dredd. Yeah, there's things to like in it. It's just not
not good.
It's not Dredd.
Nope.
And that's the thing. It's hard to adapt this character. It's been around for a while, man. It's decades this character's been around, but he's mostly popular overseas in the European nations, namely the UK. He's a big name over there. Not so much over here.
Nope.
And back in the 90s, they attempted to adapt him into film form with the aforementioned Stallone vehicle named Judge Dredd. But we're not talking about that chunk of crap. We're talking about Dredd. Hit that music! The year was 2012, and Dredd hit theaters, sort of. It was a small release.
Yeah.
Didn't really make a lot of money.
It just kind of clomped on, and no one saw it.
And that's a shame. But see, the thing is, I didn't miss it one way or the other because I was fucking locked up.
Yep.
Not in ISO cubes, but in stupid-ass Texas prison, which licks my donkey balls off.
Worse.
But see, the thing is, eventually I had to get out, and when I did get out, I said, it's time to see Dredd. In fact, this was one of the first movies I said I got to see.
Yep.
The problem was I'd been awake for about 3 days straight.
Interestingly, I did campaign against you watching it sleepy.
You did, but I was excited. I wanted to see it, damn it. And just the casting alone made me want to see it. Karl Urban is one of my favorites when it comes to people that don't get any recognition and that you want always to be in lead roles but hardly ever get them. And to me, he was Dredd, and I needed to see that immediately. But it was a mistake to see it while I was tired because I didn't even remember anything, apparently, because we recently rewatched it. And I was like, this is all new to me because I didn't fucking have any recollection of anything whatsoever. And that's not a slight against the movie. That's a slight against me for being a fool and thinking I could stay up, or correction, thinking I could be fully conscious after 3 days of being awake, almost on the verge of hallucinations.
Seems to be the norm nowadays.
Great. Well, I'm a strange guy. But the point is, I finally saw it under the proper conditions. Now, I will say this, full disclosure, the first time I saw it, I was horribly disappointed. But then again, I didn't remember anything from it.
Yeah.
Because of that aforementioned tiredness.
We're about to freaking brawl over it.
Yeah. But you also mentioned that you were tired too, and that it was not a movie to see while you were tired. And I don't even know if I could agree with you on that anymore because I literally did not remember one damn thing about this fucking movie. But now I do because I saw it, fully in control of my mind, thankfully. And I gotta say, it kicked fucking ass. It's fully deserving of a cult status that it's already achieved. I think the moment it came out, it achieved the cult status.
It was actually like a super high selling when it came to Blu-rays and DVDs when it came out. It just happened to fail in the theaters.
Yeah, and fail, it did. Hard. It didn't make a lot of bank, and as a result, the future of the franchise is kind of in the air, though apparently there is going to be a television series starring Karl Urban if all things go right, so cross your fingers that happens. But here's the thing. Dredd is a storied character, as we mentioned in the intro. He comes from a variety of comics, namely shorts from a comic book called 2000 AD, later his own series, and, there's much to say about it, but one thing that's always constant is it always has kind of like this dark, edgy approach. It's always, of course, in post-apocalyptic future, and one thing that was missing from this movie, not completely, but in droves, was the satirical angle of the comic books. It was almost completely bereft of that. But I don't think that's to his detriment, and I'll get into why that is. Other than that, it kept the ultra-violent aspects of it. It kept kind of like the undertones of dark humor in it, although not as brash as the comic book counterpart, but they were there. But anyway, the movie was brought to us by Alex Garland, a writer who is pretty well renowned, especially for working with Danny Boyle. He did, for example, 28 Weeks Later. So that made me all the more excited to see it or experience it the right way, I should say. And yeah, I was not disappointed, man. What is your overall take on this movie?
I'm a huge fan of it. I've seen it more than 5 times, which is kind of rare for me. And I definitely want there to be a continuation. Hopefully the show can pick up where this one left off.
Yeah, I hope so too, man. But let's talk about the components of this picture. First and foremost, I think what we have to get out there is that it presented the world of Dredd incredibly well and incredibly succinctly in a short space of time. You really get a feeling for Mega City 1 and the surrounding landscapes with just narrations and quick shots of it. And in just showing, I mean, they're basically restricted to one building the whole movie, basically. But in just showing you the interactions of the people within and the way the judges interact themselves, you get a feeling for what this world, how this world works. And, you know, I don't know if somebody that's not familiar with the product would not get that feeling or not, but I think they would. I mean, the Guardian saw it, and he was pretty much...
Yeah, I think in the beginning, especially with the narration and the bits they show of how the judges, or the little headquarters or whatever, I think that does a good job. That alone does a good job of showing you how, you know, crime heavy the city is, or the place is. And then, you know, when they get to the block, you're like, ooh, this is just one of like 10 trillion. And that's what I like about the movie so much, is that it's basically just a day in a judge's freaking life.
Yeah, and then if you haven't seen this movie, the best way to describe it would be that. It's a slice of life movie. And the way I'll put it is, if like Training Day meets a survival horror movie. Only it's not a horror movie, and clearly it's not Training Day. You know, but those concepts, you know, a slice of life, but with these characters. And if you know the character of Dredd, then you know things are going to get extreme. So basically, instead of the conceit of Training Day, where it's a rookie cop stuck with a crooked cop, and then introduced to this world surrounding that particular cop, it's a rookie cop stuck with a cop bent on extreme justice, the exact opposite of corruption, and how they deal with this world. And I love the fact that, you know, of course, Judge Anderson is a psychic, or, you know, has psychic abilities. That just adds a whole different layer to how the action is carried out and how the story eventually unfolds. That, of course, movies that are more realistic, i.e. Training Day, could not possibly have. But anyway, the characters and the actors portraying them. Of course, the show stealer has to be Dredd. What did you think of Carl Urban's portrayal?
I think he's perfect. I don't think there can be someone better than him. I'm pretty sure there is, but that we've seen so far, he's perfect Dredd, in my book.
Yeah.
Without going to extremes like Stallone did. Although I think Stallone could have been a good Dredd, that he wasn't. I think Urban nailed it.
Yeah, he definitely did. I mean, it's not that I can't imagine somebody else as Dredd. It's that I kind of don't want anybody else as Dredd now. He's pretty much sealed the deal for me. And on top of that, since the vehicle does rest on his shoulders, and he did it so exceptionally well, it would be kind of a complete letdown to move on from him at this point. So I do hope that the TV series, if it gets picked up, does carry him into the narrative, because that would be a step down in my opinion. Would it be a world destroyer? Possibly not, but again, it comes down to want. You want this guy to be Dredd. He's that good as the character. However, let's say that it hadn't been him. Who would you have picked for Dredd?
I mean, shit, I can't even think of someone.
You know who I would have picked? Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke, I think he's too extreme at this point.
I think he would have embodied like the Garth Ennis era of the comics version of Dredd, you know. But And it'd be a good excuse to hide his fucking hideous
Yeah,
face
that's a
now.
good point.
And that's another thing, by the way. One thing that the Judge Dredd movie of old in the 90s didn't do was one of the basics of Judge Dredd is you don't ever remove the fucking helmet.
Yeah.
Not once. And I know that sounds like a stickler type of thing for anybody that's not familiar with the
No, but
comics.
that's you never remove the helmet ever.
But that's part of his identity, as in keeping him that cemented in the law
Yeah.
to a ludicrous degree is just part of Dredd. And anybody that's familiar with the comic would have been disappointed that he took off his helmet, which admittedly I fucking was. I was already like, damn it, we have Rob Schneider in this fucking shit. So thankfully it doesn't make that mistake of the 90s movie. It does keep the helmet on. Sounds like something small and trivial, but damn it, it's important. But anyway, the rest of the cast, I gotta say, fucking accolades to Lena Headey playing Mama, the villain, basically a drug lord, former prostitute that's taken over an entire building, and is kind of running the drug trade for a specific designer drug, and it's her fucking like vicious tactics, basically, that bring the judges down into the center of the action, and what do you got to say about Lena Headey?
Yeah, I agree that she was. If I don't want to say that there could have been a better villain, but for this kind of story that they told, she was perfect for this story. And yeah, it was an interesting character of her own with her own little tale that was interesting enough. She kind of deserved to be in the spot she was, and it was pretty cool.
I think the ultimate benefit of having her as the villain, like you said, yes, we could have had greater villains. At one point, this script had Judge Death as the villain.
Yeah.
And as it was increasingly impossible to attain proper funding for it, they just parted down and kind of chiseled away the bigger aspects of it until it became a much smaller, tighter, grittier story.
Yeah.
Rather than this big sci-fi epic.
It's interesting because this far into Dredd, this movie, at least for me, is very much like the very first progs in 2000 AD, in that they're literally just him responding to a freaking to a crime in Mega City, and then eventually there's a story. But for the most part, in those early ones, you just get a little slice of the day in the judge's life. And this is exactly what this movie was.
And that's why I think ultimately Lena Headey's Mama is the perfect choice for the villain in this vehicle, because she serves the purpose of not only being the film's villain, but giving you a good taste of what the fucking scum of this universe, so to speak, is like. So you get a good feeling for what the gang divisions are like and what the city interactions between them is, just based off of her, and she's a good archetype for the rest of the villainous scum that resides in Mega City 1. And the thing is, she's not even remotely as evil or strange as some of the other ones, but it's a good example. It sets the tone, in other words, for what could come.
I think if they had gone extreme, at least in this movie, in the way it was portrayed, it would have been a little bit off-putting. So having someone who's a little more grounded was a smart idea.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the money to go into the more, insane stuff. So to have a grounded character with grounded portrayal of Dredd was smart.
Yes. And anyway, again, the movie centers mostly around Dredd and his partner, Judge Anderson. I think the girl that portrayed this was fantastic in the role. Played really well off of Dredd, and was an excellent audience in. Using her as the audience in this particular instance was just perfect. It was the perfect way to get anybody that's not familiar with the subject matter involved immediately. She provides that for us, and for anybody that is familiar, it's like walking down memory lane, I guess, in a matter of speaking, but through the eyes of this person. I think she did a wonderful job. Everybody else is kind of supporting characters and kind of wretched weirdos that you'd expect to live in Mega City 1. And they all looked the parts, that's for damn sure. It was fun to see, little snippets here and there.
Hot wheel.
Fat guy with a with a
stomach wheel.
Gut wheel.
Yep.
Yeah, little odes to the material. But yeah, man, I thought everybody in the cast was pretty great, pretty fantastic. Blast to see. Let's talk about the effects in this movie, which if you're expecting, top tier effects, you're not gonna get that, but you're gonna get a very stylized version of that. So while at times you can tell, of course, that some stuff is extremely digital, or that there's green screen here or there. A good example is when the corrupt judges are called to the building. I mean, they're clearly not actually writing anywhere. It's it's some sort of stage they're on. But even when you can see those things, first of all, you're a little bit forgiving because of the budgetary constraints. But second of all, the film by that point has established a certain stylized look that allows for this to be the norm. And I think the best example of this is how the designer drug that Mama is peddling, when people use it, they use that as a way to, kind of amp up the look and of the action, should the action take place while a character is high on the drug, and it gives it a particularly stylized look that allows you to really, I guess, appreciate what they had to do, to get it across. And so you're not turned off by, say, digital blood or anything like that, because it looks a particular way, and it makes sense with what's going on in the storyline. And I gotta say, they did a pretty cool job with that. When characters are under the influence of slow-mo, the drug, it looks pretty neat, and it makes for some pretty impressive action sequences. And on top of that, it gives you a sensical means to give you the, kind of like a now average, or I should say the now normal Matrix-style slow-mo action.
And what's interesting about those scenes is that it wasn't fully digital. They did use mega high-speed cameras, which, of course, later they were used in like Sherlock Holmes and shit like that. But this is one of the earliest movies to do that, so it combines digital with actual super slow-mo shit, and it looks pretty neat.
Also, the costume design in this is pretty neat. I really liked what they did with the judges. The design is much more practical.
Yeah, they toned down
than say the
ludicrousness.
The kind of ridiculous nature of their outfits in the comic books. But it was not something to be missed. You could argue that the 90s Judge Dredd movie kind of did that. They didn't look as extreme, but they were a bit more akin to the comic book.
Yeah.
Here they make a lot more sense. The costumes are much more what you'd expect out of tactical gear that's going to protect somebody in the line of duty, which, really suited the character, and really it added a level of kind of, I should say, it gave Judge Dredd an even more imposing look. So that's very important, considering Carl Urban's not exactly a huge guy.
Yeah.
So that really added to that. So I got to give props to the costume design for the judges and for all the bad guys, which looked again like the vile fucking villains that you'd expect in this type of material.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the action. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but yeah, the action is pretty much from the get-go. It's an action-forward movie. And like I said, this might be a day in the life, but it just so happens that Mega City 1 is,
shit.
It's the epitome of fucking violence.
Yeah.
So from the moment that our heroes encounter the problem ahead of them, which is that they're locked in a building and they're a target to, in the sights of everybody that dwells within, from that moment forward, you're basically steeped in action. And it's not relentless, stupid action.
Yeah.
There's suspense and there's an atmosphere definitely of dread. But yeah, man, it really keeps you hooked, instead of making you jaded and kind of making you, your eyes gloss over like something like Transformers would, where you're just like, ooh boy, this thing is just pumping it out and there's nothing behind it. This has the opposite effect in the sense that, you know, there's some genuine suspense behind it, some genuine thrills, and some excitement all in the mix.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the most impressive thing that they do with the action is that, like you said, it's not every millisecond action. When you really look at the movie, there isn't a huge amount of action. It's people like kind of just surviving. There's little moments, little beats.
Yeah, but see, that's where I think to the opposite of you in terms of this is action fucking packed. But to agree with you, it's the way it's presented, and
it's exactly what I'm trying to get to.
You use the correct word, which was it's in beats. It's in pulsing beats.
It's in beats, but the drive behind it never ends, so it feels like it's throughout.
Yeah,
like you feel their dread of trying to stay alive in the freaking situation, and thus every time there is action, it makes it it elevates the action, despite the fact that when you really look at it, people are just kind of shooting at each other.
Yeah,
but it feels really important.
Yeah, and that's an important distinguishment to make. You know, something that I don't know Michael Bay might want to fucking learn about, because can't just put action on the screen no matter how cool it looks. There has to be a meaning behind it.
A good example of what I'm trying to say is when the judges come in, the evil judges, corrupt judges come in. They kind of build it up to be like, oh, there's gonna be like an epic battle or whatever, and they go really quick. But what they're doing and the Dredd and Anderson's struggle is already so huge, so that you don't mind when they die right away, because it's just another obstacle for them. It's not like a main point where they're supposed to have like freaking insane gun fu or some shit like that. It's just a thing.
And that's the thing. The movie, like you said, it comes at you in bursts, in beats, and each is an increasingly difficult obstacle that they have to overcome. Yeah. So in that sense, you know, that's what go back to like the survival horror aspect. Or if you want to stay more in the action movie genre, then, you know, you've only to look back at movies like Escape from New York or Doomsday, you know, where it's the same essential concept. You know, people thrown into an alien situation that they're stuck in, and they come across increasingly difficult odds until they come to defeat that which has put them there. And that's this movie, only that it's also a Dredd movie on top of all that. But to add to that, and speaking of beats, the music in this is very synth heavy, very Carpenter, very 80s style, something you definitely expect. There's an industrial edge to it.
And
insane
amount of bass.
Yeah, and it really adds to the pulse pounding, you know, thrills of the moments when there's action. And when there isn't, it helps drum up the suspense, because it takes a back seat and becomes an accompaniment, you know, rather than just being up front. But the score I thought was fucking excellent on top of all that. But anyway, you got any additional thoughts about this little picture right here?
I just want to add my thoughts about the score, because I do think it's really good, like you said. And there is this time, well, I've noticed it before, but of course, every time you see it, you get, you know, refresher course, I guess. There's scenes in the movie where people are just kind of hanging around, waiting for something to happen, and a steady stream of bass is happening, and that alone makes you feel very uneasy, and really helps the feeling of something's gonna happen, something's gonna go down. So they use the music really well to make you feel like, oh shit, there's some serious shit.
Yeah, and I don't think there's ever a moment where you don't feel impending disaster. Yeah. And for this, of course, for this type of movie, that's good. It's thrilling throughout. So yeah, absolutely right about that. The final thing we got to touch upon is the overall visual look of this movie, the aesthetics of it. As you would expect, when you see things through the eyes of the judges. Just in general, the city and stuff like that. There's that very gritty urban crawl feel to it, which is what you would want out of a Dredd movie. That's exactly what you would want. Thankfully, as much as I liked the set design and the city effects and all that stuff in the original Judge Dredd.
It was too.
That was one of the
futuristic,
one of the few good things about the '90s Judge Dredd. Yeah, but it was too rooted in sci-fi,
Yeah,
and even though
it's not a realistic Mega City one.
Yeah, exactly. This seems more like what you would expect out of Mega City 1. And on top of that, it also tips a hat to the sci-fi aspects without becoming overtly silly, and it gives you a good feeling of the 80s style that we've aforementioned. So yeah, man, I was very pleased with that. Also, again, just to bring it back up, whenever the people take the designer drug, you get another visual layer added to the mix that really, changes the pace, gives you another feel for it, which is pretty neat considering, that you're used to one thing and then they do this switcheroo. Only adds to that, thrill of the whole affair. Anyway, I think it's pretty solid. I think it's pretty great. I think this is the Dredd I've always wanted. And although the movie does lack that satirical edge, this is why I say I don't think it matters. Because this is an introductory course to Dredd.
Yeah.
And it's done the perfect way. They don't go into this big, mythos-heavy...
Yeah, this is... I totally agree. Like, if they were to introduce shit like the Dark Judges and all that stuff, it would have been too much at once.
This is the exact opposite of what Black Panther was. Whereas Black Panther, you're like, all right, dude, just tone it down. We don't need 10,000 things in this fucking movie. This is bare bones essentials. You get the feeling for what you need. The judges, the law system, the gangs, and Mega City 1. And it's a course in that. Quick, brutal, to the point. And that's why I think the satiric edge, should this series continue, can bleed in eventually. And then, of course, the other aspects, the more sci-fi aspects, the stranger stuff like the mutants and the Dark Judges, slowly you can bring that in. This is a great foundation for a series. The question is, will it continue to be a series now that that's up in the air? Hopefully, yes, because the fan support is big, despite the zero amount of people that went to go see it in the theater.
Yeah.
There's enough support behind it. So
it did do well in England, but that's expected. Over here, it just tanked.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You want to win the American market to really make it an impact, and they didn't do that. However, it is an immediate cult success, so we shall see where it goes. And what is it, like in 2020? We'll probably find out where.
I'm sure there's been updates since then, but last I heard, they were saying they were aiming for 2020.
So maybe this will continue, and I hope it does, because what we've seen so far is fantastic, and I'm anxious to see more. Anyway, if you haven't seen Dredd 2012, not Judge Dredd with fucking Sylvester Stallone, fuck that shit.
I think it was smart to distance themselves from that Dredd, too.
Then please check it out. It is pretty fucking awesome. You'll love it if you've loved stuff like Escape from New York, Doomsday, The Raid, etc.
Yeah.
If you've not seen, Wieners, Paddington, this is the one for you. Even if you haven't seen none of those, see this one. It is fantastic. One of the few good movies that Lionsgate released in the last few years.
Yeah, no shit.
This has been Ahab. That's the Goon Take. Wait, before we even fucking leave, what's your final rating on Dredd?
I don't know if it's my
scale to 1 to 10.
I don't know if it's my love for Dredd and the fact that they finally got it right, but I'm always gonna give this one a 10 for me. I don't know if it's too high or not, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 10 as well, because it's that good. I mean, if I'm going to be honest with myself, I'll give it a 9.8, because again, there's those little elements that you'd those extra elements that you'd expect from Dredd, but they're not necessary in this particular picture. Yeah. So I'm just going to go whole hog and 10 it. 10, you heard it here first.
This is as good as Paddington 2.
No, nothing can beat Paddington 2, apparently.
That's a good point.
Anyway, Ahab, Goon Take, hit like, share, subscribe, because we're out.
Movies, music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Anything goes inside the night, woke up with corpulent dudes. Movies, music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Anything goes